In wildlife photography, getting a sharp image is crucial to the quality of your image. A sharp image allows for viewers to keep attention on the focal point in your image and allows for many intricate details of your subject to be shown off. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to get the sharpest images possible with your camera setup and a program that will correct your images you take that might be blurry or even out of focus. Let's start out with some fundamentals that you must understand to get a sharp image. If you're watching this video just to learn about the sharpening program, I'd recommend skipping forward to the later chapter in this video. If not, stick around. Fundamentally, it's so important to understand motion blur and what affects it. Motion blur is what happens when you see the wildlife subject that you are shooting get blurry, often streaked in one direction or another, even though these streaks can be very minute and almost unnoticeable. When it comes to motion blur, there can be two main causes. One, motion blur can be caused by low shutter speed. If you find yourself often getting blurry shots, check your shutter speed data in your images and see if it corresponds. A safe shutter speed to use with more relaxed wildlife subjects is often somewhere between 1/250th of a second and 1/500th of a second. However, if you're capturing birds in flight or animals running, a safer shutter speed often is 1/2500th of a second or even 1/4000th of a second, depending on the species that you're shooting. Motion blur can often be caused by camera shake as well. Most cameras nowadays have pretty good image stabilization built into the body and lens, but if you're using an older DSLR or an older lens, this may be more difficult. Using a tripod can correct this easily, but if you aren't looking to use a tripod, I'd recommend testing out how good your image stabilization is out in the field to see what works with your gear setup. If you have really good built-in image stabilization, you may be able to shoot down as low as 1/125th of a second on a still subject. But if your built-in image stabilization isn't as great or non-existent, you may have to pull up as high as 1/500th of a second to get shots on a still subject. The most important trick to use when it comes to motion blur, however, is to make sure that you shoot in photo burst mode. This will allow you to capture many images in sequence and then pick out the right one. Often when shooting in tough conditions, like these, you'll miss 5 to 10 shots and then by chance happen to land one. So if you shot in burst mode, this will allow you the option to cycle through many more images in shorter time frames. Next, there are a plethora of things we could dive into in regards to focusing, but I'll keep it short due to the fact that every camera system differs, so it would be impossible to cover them all. If you're shooting in autofocus, make sure you are shooting at the correct settings. Often on newer cameras, the eye detection works well, and you can use that. Or in trickier scenarios where the autofocus isn't working so hot, you can use a single point focus to determine exactly where you want focus to hit by putting a cursor over it. Ultimately, you'll have to test out for yourself to see what works, but if autofocus isn't giving you the results you'd hope for, I'd highly recommend checking out this video in the card above or in the description below to learn how to manual focus well, as I believe it's an invaluable skill to have in wildlife photography. And lastly, before we dive into the program that will change your editing life, it's important to know your lens functionality and capability. Most lenses shoot sharper when stopped down 1 or 2 steps from their minimum aperture. So if you can sacrifice the light coming into your camera just a little, turning down that f-stop number or turning up that f-stop number, just 1 or 2 bumps will increase the sharpness of your image. Each lens is different, so I can't tell you what's best for you, but I'd recommend going outside, taking a picture of a still subject at multiple different f-stop numbers, and comparing them in Lightroom blown up largely and zoomed in to see what aperture resulted in the sharpest images for your setup. Now, the moment you've been waiting for. Topaz Sharpen AI is an absolute game changer to help you achieve sharper images. Not only can this program help enhance the sharpness of your images slightly on subjects, but it can also take out of focus images and correct them and bring them back into focus. Let me show you. All right, you guys, so we got Sharpen AI pulled up, and now that we've selected our image, the image will pop up here on the screen. And what you'll notice, you'll have an original, before, and an after image. And what this program is going to do is help. So you'll notice in this image, I got a slightly blurry common merganser in this image. This is far zoomed in. And then obviously I got a good amount of noise going on in the image. And then I also got a lot of streaking going on. So if I show you the original image, let's zoom out all the way to fit. So this is what the image looks like. So what we're going to try to do is make it to where we correct this slight bit of motion blur in the actual common merganser and make sure that it stays really nice and sharp while everything else kind of gets still very very blurred and nice looking. I love this feature about Sharpen AI. So what we're going to do in this image is we're going to select our settings, and I actually already have it on what I like. I found in Sharpen AI that out of focus, very blurry works the best in 90% of scenarios. Occasionally, I'll wind up using motion blur if things are really blurred and I'm trying to get that subject really nice and back and intact. But out of focus, very blurry seems to do the best job of denoising the whole background while still retaining and sharpening up that subject really nicely and helping it to stand out prominently. So you can see the difference here between these two images. It blurred out a lot of the noise in the background, as well as getting this subject much sharper in the image. So the subject looks a lot nicer. Let's zoom in a little bit here, and you can see how much that subject pops out. So I really like the results here. You can also mess with how much it removes the blur around it. So like, let's pull this up. And I would argue that actually might do a better job. And we could also do something to suppress less or more noise. So let's say we want to get more noise suppressed around it. That'll help out there as opposed to not. That's a little bit about how that works on your Sharpen AI program. But let's pick out a different image that's even a little bit more obvious how much it needs it. Now let's pull up this image of a snow goose that I got. So you can see very clearly that the snow goose was slightly out of focus here. And you also have a really kind of big and, let's say, distracting background a little bit with a lot of the noise and just how detailed it is. So we want to clean that up. Essentially on this image, I would do the same very blurry, out of focus. Probably going to do remove less blur. That way it's not quite so harsh on my subject. And for the suppressed noise, let's keep that up a little higher. And you'll see that when I have all those settings in place, now the goose is quite a bit more back in focus. And the rest of the background got a lot smoother and a lot more nicely denoised, which just allowed for a better isolation of the subject. So I really like the results of how Sharpen AI winds up doing this. So you can notice the before and the after looks great. And one of the other cool things about Sharpen AI is I found that it also works great even on images where you're just needing a much cleaner background. It works really well as a denoising program. The only thing to be hesitant on is if you already have a sharp subject, you might wind up over sharpening them. So if you refer back to my last video that I made on denoise AI, you'll kind of notice what's going on there and what I'm kind of talking about there. But otherwise, it actually does a phenomenal job at denoising, and I really like this program for that sake. Ultimately, if you're looking to get sharp shots, it's important to not only shoot your images well in the moment, but also have the software to post-process it correctly and correct it when those unavoidable moments happen in wildlife photography, where you miss focus to capture a subject or a subject is just too blurry. My link below contains a 15% off, so don't forget to use it to receive your discount if you wind up purchasing these programs today. Through my experience of using Topaz Sharpen AI for over a year now, I've found it incredibly useful in a ton of situations, not only for sharpening, but also for denoising and as previously mentioned. If you're interested in learning about how Topaz Sharpen AI can be used as a denoise program on your images, check out the video in the end screen here. And again, if you're interested in purchasing Topaz Denoise AI or Sharpen AI or Photo AI for yourself, I'd greatly appreciate if you use my affiliate link below. It literally saves you money while helping support this channel, so there is no downside to it. I'll see you guys next time.